All right, so the Browns, they beat the Cincinnati Bengals in a very storybook type of ending there. Burrow drives down the field and scores a what looked to be a go-ahead touchdown. And Shador Sanders, who did not play well at all today. It was bad. It was borderline horrible. And he did miss throws, but he made plays that needed to be made. A great throw to Jerry Jeudy, who almost dropped the ball too. Jeez, he had a rough year too. Jerry Jeudy did, but I think that had to deal with all the quarterback changes and the offensive line also not being good, like, at all. But he had a rough year. He catches the drag route. Good little play by Jerry Jeudy to keep the drive alive. Browns go down and kick a game-winning field goal from Andre Schmidt, who I could go back to week 1 and I said, if Andre Schmidt is still on the team in next week or whatever it was, then it was going to be bad. And he proved me wrong, and I'm really, really glad to say that he did, because the Browns needed a kicker. After Phil Dawson leaves, we go through all these people, and some kickers are actually on NFL teams right now that are really, really good, like McPherson is one. There's another one that I'm forgetting, but the Browns have gone through so many kickers over the last few years, and it looked like we found one in Dustin Hopkins. He fizzles out at the end, or the entire last year. He fizzles out. They ended up cutting him in the preseason, and they make Andre Schmidt the starting kicker for week 1. He comes out and misses an extra point and like a 20 or like a 30-yard field goal, somewhere in that range. And cost the Browns the win in week 1, a game that the Browns probably should have won at home in Cleveland, with Trey Hendrickson going through all of his stuff at the beginning of the year, I remember, and all of his contract stuff. That was the game to get the Bengals. Definitely dealing with some offseason drama. Myles Garrett was not. That was in the beginning of the offseason, really, when he requested a trade, so the Browns were already through that. And Hendrickson just came back, I think, like 2 weeks before the season started, if not later. So that was a frustrating game for me to watch, especially I thought that the Browns would not be able to beat the Bengals this week, especially, it being at home and the Browns really kind of struggling to beat Cincinnati at home, especially with how bad the Browns have been for the past 2 years. And they proved me wrong, and it was the complete opposite story of what happened and what cost the Browns the game, cost the Cincinnati Bengals the game. McPherson, who during this Bengals peak, going to the Super Bowl and making those playoff runs, he was the guy that was making all those clutch kicks. He beat the Chiefs with a game-winning field goal. He beat the Titans, I think, in the first round with a game-winning field goal. And, that the Cincinnati Bengals looked like they had the kicker of the future. And he struggled here and there a little bit for the past few years. And, he has a block kick and misses a kick, and the Bengals lose by 2. So right there, those 2 points cost the Bengals the game. And, the Browns are now, if the Commanders win, the Browns can jump them and go up to, I believe, the 6th pick. But right now, the Browns are locked in at the 7th pick, which makes trading up for a quarterback, which I think I at least wanted for the majority of this year, a quarterback in this draft. And, this game kind of proved me right, I feel like. I don't think Shador Sanders is the answer here. I think he would benefit from being behind a guy and learning like that. And I think he definitely did benefit that this year. But as teams kind of figured him out and got to see his tendencies and what he was doing in the pocket and his mistakes, he kind of not fizzled out, but he slowed down considering how hot he starting. And, won his first start, lost the rest of them, and then won his last 2 starts of the season. Last 2 games of the season, he beats Pittsburgh and beats Cincinnati. But yet again, the Browns offensively score, 20 points. The Browns scored 20 points this game. The Browns offensively scored 6 of those 20 points. Both field goals. The Browns offense did not get in the end zone at all this week. And, I'm splitting hairs because obviously the Browns did win, but now we got to think about the future. Is Shedeur Sanders a guy that's going to be able to make a deep playoff run? With his tendencies of making big risks. He's a Jameis Winston. I've said this before. He is Jameis Winston. He is a guy that has the guts to make those big plays, but does not have the arm talent or the accuracy or the physical attributes that you need to make those big plays. But his mental game is like, I can make that play, when in reality his physical game cannot make that play more times than not. Obviously they're going to make plays, but more times than not his physical attributes and his arm talent, his arm accuracy, that kind of thing, his size, he's a very short quarterback. I think he had a few bad balls. The Bengals bat down a few of the Shedeur Sanders passes today too, and that's been a problem all year because of Shedeur Sanders' height. And that's why I really wanted Mendoza before Mendoza really took off, was because he was so tall. And I know a lot of people say that Mendoza did not really do anything before Indiana, but he had a really, really good season last year with Cal, but Cal was so bad that no one noticed him. So, Fernando Mendoza's always been there, and congratulations to Fernando Mendoza because he is going to be a Raider. He's going to Vegas. It's just a matter of if Dante Moore is going to declare from the draft. And the deeper Oregon goes into the playoff, the more and more likely he is going to declare from the draft, or declare to the draft, not from the draft, but to the draft. And Oregon's, I think, quarterback coach is also leaving. I think their offensive coordinator, is leaving at the end of the year to take a job somewhere. So, the offensive staff, which, players are more likely to have a relationship with their coordinator and their position coach rather than the head coach. So, when position quarterbacks or position coaches leave a team or coordinators leave a team, it's more likely that you're going to have transfers out and people declaring more than staying. And we'll see what happens with Dante Moore, and we'll see. Now, if Dante Moore does fall to Cleveland, I think the Browns do pick him up. Is it likely to happen? No. I think there's a lot more teams in front of the Browns that want a quarterback. The Cardinals are probably going to look for a quarterback. They're ahead of the Browns. The Jets are definitely looking for a quarterback. They're ahead of the Browns. And, it is what it is. Now, we'll see if the Browns can maybe trade up ahead of those teams or offer them those some picks that, maybe entice them to drop back in the draft and be like, we can't pass this up right now. If the Browns do trade up, I think it's very unlikely that the Browns have those 2 picks in the first round. I think because they're so far back in the first round, for quarterbacks that is, then, they're probably going to trade that Jacksonville pick. And Jacksonville just won their division, so that's going to be a late to mid-20s pick probably. So not a very valuable first-round pick, really. So we'll see. It's all about, and if Dante Moore does not declare from the draft, obviously this doesn't matter. I think the only quarterback in this class that is worth a high first-round pick is Fernando Mendoza. The Raiders are locked in. They're on the clock. They have the first pick. Mendoza's obviously going to go number 1 to the Raiders unless he has a very bad injury, and no one wants that. So, I think it was in the best interest for the Browns to lose this game. Obviously, the players don't want to lose games, so, they're not going to tank. And, I'm glad that the Browns allowed people like Myles Garrett to play all season, and we weren't the Raiders who, basically benched Max Crosby so they wouldn't win games. And, hold on, real quick, why haven't I talked about this? Myles Garrett is the new sack king. He broke the record today in the second half. I did not talk about this in the first half, but I was really, really worried. I thought the Myles Garrett, if he didn't get the sack in the first half, he wasn't going to get it. And he proved me wrong, and he got him. Joe Burrow honestly looked like he kind of laid down and gave up on the play. And, that's funny considering Brett Favre did the same thing with the guy that broke the record initially. T.J. Watt tied him up. I forget his name. I can never remember his name. But, obviously he played before I was even born. So, that kind of thing sucks. And, it is what it is. And the Browns, they have a new sack king in Myles Garrett. If he gets a championship to Cleveland, sorry about that, but if the Browns can win a championship with Myles Garrett, I think that Myles Garrett goes down as the greatest Brown ever. And he passes Jim Brown. But that has to... Myles Garrett cannot win a championship by himself. He's not LeBron. This isn't basketball. So, if the Browns can win a championship, at some point in Myles Garrett's career, with him on the team, obviously, I think that cements himself as the best Brown in Cleveland Browns history. I think he's already, if he retires tomorrow, I think he's got a gold jacket waiting for him. I don't think anyone is really denying that. Anybody that's saying that TJ Watt is still better than Myles Garrett is dead wrong, and you should never talk to them about football ever. Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in football. And he has gotten Defensive Player of the Year locked up. I don't think there's any argument really for anybody else. Carson Schlesinger probably has Defensive Rookie of the Year locked up. We'll see, because he got put on IR for his injury. But a lot of bright spots on this team. Harold Fainin, Carson Schlesinger, Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins. All these rookies. And Gabriel's probably... I would like to see Gabriel probably be traded in the Browns side. Kenny Pickett again for something for like a backup role. Or even a third string on the practice squad like he was in the preseason. And, I don't think there's really a future here in Cleveland for Dylan Gabriel. There might be a future here for Shedeur Sanders. We'll see. I don't really know. I don't think that he's the quarterback of the future. But I know other people feel like he is our franchise guy. And, I would love for Shedeur Sanders to prove me wrong. Because, you don't spend a first-round pick on a guy that turns out to be your franchise guy. That would be the best case scenario for the Browns. That would open up their window for the Browns. I don't really have any guys to take over head coaching positions. I'm almost positive that Kevin Stefanski will be fired at the end of this year. I've heard, Brian Flores and, Mike McDaniel is also an option. I don't know. I don't know about those guys. I think if the Browns want a best shot, I think you probably want an unknown guy, kind of like Kevin Stefanski was. You probably want like a coordinator or, an unknown guy to come in and kind of push the reset button on everything, but keep the culture and the building blocks the same. You don't want to tear everything down because not everything is, rotten to the core. Now, there's some of it that probably needs to be demolished, but the foundation is still good on this team. And, if we can get a competent head coach that can build an offense and, get some wide receivers in here and some offensive linemen in here and maybe a quarterback, we'll see in here, and this defense can stay at their peak, this is a Super Bowl caliber team. Now, that's a lot to do in 1 to 2 years, but it's still possible. So, in the next 2 years, this defense is going to start asking for more money, and some people are going to have to go. But the foundation is there. The foundation is the defense, and that is there. All we really need is at the very least, a comparable to good offense. And, and we're right there in the playoff picture. And with the Chiefs not being what the Chiefs are and the AFC kind of being down a little bit and the AFC North not being what it was, Harbaugh or Tomlin, the loser of that game tonight might even be fired. I feel like if the Ravens lose, Harbaugh is definitely going to be fired. I'd be open to getting Harbaugh. Maybe. I don't know. I got to think about that because that's really hard for me. I don't like the Harbaugh family. I don't like Jim Harbaugh. I don't like John Harbaugh as people. And, what Jim Harbaugh did at Michigan is something that can never be, forgiven or forgotten. So, it's a double-edged sword for me. If Harbaugh works out in Cleveland, this is a big, big if. If Harbaugh works out in Cleveland, cool. I can forgive, but I can never forget kind of thing. But if Tomlin goes, I know I said last week that I don't want Tomlin. That was a very, very knee-jerk reaction for me. I think the ceiling of Mike Tomlin is obviously a Super Bowl head coach. The floor is still a winning record, at least in Pittsburgh it was. We'll see if Tomlin does go somewhere. He's obviously got an NFL job waiting for him if the Steelers do end up letting him go. He's obviously got NFL jobs waiting for him. It's just a matter of who he wants to go to. But, you know, the only time will tell. Maybe both of those coaches don't get fired and we still play them twice a year. That's a very, very real possibility. So, with all that being said, that's going to do it for football for the 2025 year on this channel. That's crazy. Obviously, I will still have some off-season stuff. The Ohio State news will be coming out, transfer portal, early previews, things like that. I might even do like a draft, a mock draft for the Browns of what I would like to see them doing in the offseason, maybe some signings, instant reaction stuff, if anything breaks, coaching hires, coaching firings, stuff like that. Football will always be a year-long thing on this channel. It's my favorite sport, obviously. This is what I've consistently been doing for the past 6 months. So, obviously, we'll see what the Cavs do. Maybe we can get a playoff run, and I can do instant reactions for those as well. Baseball season is going to start up here in the summer. Obviously, it's the dead of winter right now, so that's obviously a long ways to go. But, this is why we love sports. It's a year-long thing, and sports obviously don't last 24/7, but there's always something else that you can pick up on, and there's always something else that you can talk about, which is what I love. And, I'll be doing that. Maybe it's not as consistent. I'm going to try and do at least one upload a week. We'll see how consistent I can be with that. With my school starting up in a little bit here, we'll see how consistent I can be. But I definitely want to get more out to you guys so we continue to grow the following here and, get viewership up and things like that. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys. If everyone has been watching this entire season, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. This is all new for me. Obviously not experienced with this at all. But, we're going to take it by year and, it is what it is. But until then, till preseason, maybe. We'll see if I do preseason. But for sure, until week 1 next year, go Dogs.